Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So obviously this morning, Jarmo was fired by the Columbus Blue Jackets after being there since 2013. I think he was roughly 11 years on the dot. He was hired mid-season back in 2013. So he was there for a long time, and there was a lot of ups and downs. I wouldn't say it was like a massive failure, hence why we're doing this video of best and worst. He went 390, 352, and 92 as the general manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets, which is a 52.3% points percentage, which puts them around 86 points, which, again, not great, but they had some good years. They made the playoffs 5 out of 11 seasons. So today, I wanted to go through some of his biggest and best and worst moves. We're going to go through 5 of his best, 5 of his worst, because it is pretty hit or miss. There's obviously some trades that come to mind that he absolutely fleeced people, and then some pretty horrendous signings that really killed them, especially of late. So let's get into it. And up first, for the first worst one, I have the Oliver Bjorkstrand trade. Bjorkstrand coming off a 57-point season. He had 28 goals, 29 assists at 26 years old. It was 1 year into a 5-year, $5.4 million contract. In the prior 2 years, he had 44 points in 56 games and 36 points in 49 games. He established himself as a legit 55 to 60 point guy at 26 years old, only making $5.4 million, which is very good value. It was not one of the best contracts in the entire NHL, but it was definitely surplus value. And he decided to trade him to the Seattle Kraken, not for a first round pick, not for a second round pick, but for a third and fourth round pick in an offseason trade. In the moment, I thought that was horrendous. I was like, Seattle's picking up either a great second liner or a low end first liner for their team for basically nothing. And that's basically what it's materialized into. Bjorkstrand is playing very good right now with the Seattle Kraken. There's obviously that infamous video of him getting chosen to be an all-star where he seemed to be pissed. And while he's not an upper echelon all-star, he has 40 points in 53 games right now, which puts him on pace for 62 points. So yeah, they basically gave away a solid around 60-point guy on a good contract for a third and fourth round pick. That was absolutely horrendous asset management for a guy like Bjorkstrand. If they ended up getting a second and a third, it wouldn't be that bad, but he was probably worth like a first round pick based on, again, almost going for 30 and 30 and being pretty cost controlled. I just absolutely hated that trade. We're going over to the best. We got to keep this somewhat upbeat and light. And I got the Artemi Panarin trade. Jesus, I got the Artemi Panarin trade back in 2017. He traded Brandon Saad, Anton Forsberg, and a fifth-round pick for Artemi Panarin, Tyler Mott, and a sixth-round pick. Panarin, of course, would only play 2 seasons with the Columbus Blue Jackets, but he tore it up, having 169 points in 160 games, while Brandon Saad basically was just like an okay around 40 to 50 point low-end second liner, high-end third liner. He got a star player basically for no future assets. Basically, it was just a one-for-one for Brandon Saad at the end of the day. So although Panarin wasn't there for the long haul, it was definitely worth it. If you're a Columbus that can't really attract this high-end talent, you do this trade 11 out of 10 times every single time. And this is probably his best or second best move of this entire list. Getting a guy like Artemi Panarin, even though he would go on to leave, it was a great deal. Number 2 in terms of the worst, not protecting William Karlsson. And this is a bit of like there's two trades within this. Or 2 moves within this. Obviously, not trading William Karlsson was very bad in terms of the fact that it wasn't like he went to the Vegas Golden Knights and then in 2 to 3 seasons he eventually broke out. Immediately, as soon as he got to the Vegas Golden Knights, he had 43 goals, was like near point per game on the Vegas Golden Knights, would lead them as the number 1 center to a goddamn Stanley Cup final. So there was clearly a miss. Although he wasn't that good in that 2017 season for Columbus, there was a bad evaluation in terms of not protecting him, and not even not protecting him with the initial list. They went on to trade David Clarkson in a first and a second round pick to Vegas to take William Karlsson in the expansion draft instead of Josh Anderson and Korpisalo. So they traded away assets for Vegas to take on William Karlsson because they thought Josh Anderson and Korpisalo were just that valuable, when it is obvious that William Karlsson has developed into the far, far better player. Yes, he's not a consistent 40-goal guy, but for the last 3 or 4 seasons, he's been one of the best two-way second-line centers in the entire NHL. Gets you around 55 to 60 points, and this year is honestly in the Selke race. So when looking at this, just opting for Josh Anderson even back then, it maybe would have been the right choice, but just a bad eval by Jarmo Kakalainen in terms of that, in terms of giving up on a guy that was only 23 or 24 years old. They should have made something work and have them take an older player. They protected a Brandon Saad, a Dubinsky, a bunch of other veterans that were better players than William Karlsson at that time, but clearly did not have the potential. And it wasn't like Columbus was competing at a high level back then. So clearly that is developed into one of the worst expansion stories of recent memory. In terms of a good deal, I'm going to go with the 2022 draft. Yes, these guys have not panned out into like absolute superstars, but when you look at what they had in this 2022 draft, I thought they had a great 2023 draft as well, but Adam Fantilli kind of just fell into their laps. In 2022, he took David Jiricek with the 6th overall pick. I still think he's eventually going to develop into their number one defenseman in like 4 or 5 years once Werenski kind of goes down, as well as getting a guy like Denton Mateychuk not all the way, but at 12th overall, where a couple guys before him went that I would obviously take Mateychuk over. Mateychuk has been playing very good in Canadian Hockey Junior League, right? The CHL. As of right now, I think he's going to develop into a very good offensive defenseman, as well as getting a guy like Jordan Dumais, who has been leading the QMJHL in points per game the past 2 years. He is dealing with hip surgery right now, but he looks like a potential steal. He was the last pick in the 3rd round, as well as a guy like Sergei Ivanov, a 5th round Russian goaltender that they took that right now has like a 929 in the KHL. He's looking like he could potentially turn into their starting franchise goalie at one point. If you do good in the KHL, you're probably going to translate over to the NHL pretty well, especially considering he's only 19. So although we don't have the final verdict on this draft class, I thought he really killed it without having that top 3 sure thing pick like an Adam Fantilli. And he also had a very good 2021 draft class with Sillinger and Kent Johnson just overall, but I would pinpoint that 2022 class. Yeah, he did do a very good job drafting the last 2 to 3 drafts, in my opinion. We're going back to the worst. And we have the Eric Goodbranson deal. He signed Eric Goodbranson at 31 years old to a 4-year contract, $4 million per. First year was just straight up horrendous. And Goodbranson was playing like 18 minutes the year before that they signed him. He was not this good guy. I don't know why you gave him 4 years, $4 million. Everybody hated in the moment. First year was absolutely a train wreck. This year he is playing better defensively. But again, I probably not worth $4 million, and especially the next 2 years as he's 33 and 34 and 35. Like this was just an aggressively bad deal. It felt like he was kind of pigeonholed. He had to somewhat address the defense core, which if you got like a 28, 29-year-old, I could maybe understand. But Eric Goodbranson has just been living off the reputation of him going 3rd overall all the way back in 2010. Like he has been coasting off that. So in looking at it, it's just bad. And now they kind of have a log jam in terms of their young defensemen trying to come up, because a guy like Goodbranson has 2 years left at $4 million after this. You're obviously not going to probably stash him in the AHL. Like you got to play him if he's making that much money. The owner wants him to play. So this deal was just an utter disaster by them. Back to the good. Boone Jenner signing a 4-year, $3.75 million contract. Not a superstar by any means, but he is your captain since Nick Foligno has left back all the way back in 2020 whenever he got traded. So Boone Jenner has been just a solid captain for this team, and the fact Jarmo was able to lock him up basically at like high-end third liner money at $3.75 million. Since then, he's been around a 50 to 55 point guy, playing solid two-way game and playing like 18 minutes a night against the team's best competition, going up against other number one centers. This deal was very good by the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I wouldn't be surprised if the next general manager comes in, looks that he has 2 years left after this at 3.75, and ends up trading him for a first-round pick. So this was a very good extension by Jarmo Kakalainen. Back to the bad. Johnny Gaudreau. Obviously, Johnny Gaudreau's deal not looking good. 7 years, $9.75 million. First year wasn't horrendous. He had 74 points in 80 games, only 21 goals. So it was bad, but it was like, yeah, he could get back to point per game, even at point per game with the cap going up. It wouldn't be the end of the world. But this year he has been far worse. 35 points, not 35 goals. 35 goals in 52 games. He's killing it. He's going to win the Rocket. But 35 points in 52 games as of right now, and only 7 of those are goals. He's 30 years old. He has 5 years left on this deal after this. It is really going to the Goodbranson one isn't as bad because the next 2 years after this, Columbus shouldn't really be competing at that high of a level. Johnny Gaudreau's final 3 years of this deal, the Columbus Blue Jackets should be a competitive team, assuming they're young guys like Jiricek, Johnson, Sillinger, Mateychuk, Fantilli, Brindley all pan out. Like, they still have a very good future. But if they pan out, They should be a playoff team in 3 years. I know they got to get better management in there or else Columbus is going to Columbus. But in 3 years, they should be fighting for a playoff spot and having a 33-year-old Johnny Gaudreau that's putting up 50 points and making $9.75 million. That is really going to hurt them. And although it was exciting for the Columbus Blue Jackets to get the rare superstar that wanted to come to Columbus, it was because they were in the United States and they were only team willing to offer him that much money. And it just, he said he cared about winning. Clearly wasn't the case. But now they are stuck with this deal that is slowly developing into one of the worst deals in the entire NHL. Back to the good. Let's be positive. The Scott Hartnell trade. They traded RJ Umberger and a 4th-round pick for Scott Hartnell. And Hartnell was pretty solid for them. He had 60 points in his first season and then 49 and then 37. So he was a very solid veteran presence when they were a playoff team back in between, I think they traded for him summer of 2014. So 2015, 2016, 2017, they were a highly competitive team. Scott Hartnell was a very good player for them. Meanwhile, Umberger, the season after he got traded, had 16 points in 64 games, then had 11 points in 61 games, and that was basically out of the league. So it was basically a swap of Umberger and Hartnell, the 4th-round pick as well. Who really cares about that? And Columbus clearly got the better player in that trade, so it was a rare Jarmo win. Back to the worst, we have the Mike Babcock hiring. Jarmo spent months looking for his guy, and what did his guy end up being? It ended up being Mike Babcock. He told everybody he's changed, he's a different man, it's not going to happen again, like what happened in Toronto, like what basically got him not banned from the league, but basically blacklisted from the NHL in terms of being way too hard on these young players. And then you find out 2 months in, early September, Spitting Chicklets obviously has that report that he was apparently going through young players' phones. Columbus handles it horribly. They deny. The NHL comes in, investigates. Turns out he did do it with a couple players. They had to fire Babcock, just made Columbus, who didn't already have the best reputation back in 2023, they made them look like the biggest laughingstock, the biggest joke of the entire NHL. And who does that mainly fall on? That mainly falls on the general manager, Jarmo Kakalainen, that did decide to put his reputation on the line with the Mike Babcock, and it completely backfired. And we are going to end on a positive, with that being the Seth Jones trade, the final best deal. He fleeced the shit out of Stan Bowman. I remember thinking that this was fake when I got the phone notification when Chicago wasn't close to winning now. They go out, they trade for Seth Jones. They trade Seth Jones, the 32nd overall pick, which was Columbus traded Seth Jones, the 32nd overall pick, which was Nolan Allen, who's really a nothing burger, and a 6th-round pick for 2 first-round picks that turned into David Jiricek and Cole Sillinger, as well as Adam Boquist, who was the Blackhawks 2018 8th overall pick and is still an okay player, and a 2nd-round pick that went to some Finnish guy that's still developing. So basically, they got Jiricek, Sillinger, and Boquist for Seth Jones, who they needed to pay this massive contract that Chicago, for some reason, was willing to do, and as a result, this really re-jumped their kind of rebuild retool, even though the past 2 summers it wasn't really a rebuild because Jarmo rushed it with the Gaudreau signing and all that. But they're set up for the future in part because they got 2 very valuable pieces, as well as Boquist to a degree. But they got potentially their number 1 defenseman, as well as a guy that I still think can be a solid second liner in Cole Sillinger. Not what we expected after his first year. We thought he might have been an eventual first liner elite player because he was so good. He put up 32 points at 18 years old. But looking at this deal, it was just fantastic. Instead of massively overpaying for Seth Jones, who was overrated as shit at that point, got off of him and got a shit ton of future assets. So that's the video. We'll go through it. The worst: Bjorkstrand, Carlson, Goodbranson, Gaudreau, Babcock, and the best, the positives: Panarin, 2022 draft, Boone Jenner extension, Scott Hartnell trade, and Seth Jones trade. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this? If I'm a Columbus fan, I am very happy that Jarmo Kakalainen is finally gone. Hopefully they bring in some new age, not an analytical guy, but just someone that's more of a forward thinker and is willing to wait out more so of a proper rebuild retool. I still think they're going to need another year or 2 of not outright tanking. You cannot re-tank, but playing the young guys as much as possible. Don't be burying Adam Fantilli in the 4th line. Don't be sending Kent Johnson and David Jiricek down. Let the young guys play. Stink for the rest of this year. Maybe stink for the following year. And I actually think the future is pretty bright in Columbus. So let me know in the comments what do you think. And I'll be seeing you in the next one.